Hey there, everybody. How's it going? Nice to see you again. Thanks for tuning in. So the first order of business is A Painter Passing Through by Edward Martins is now shipping. So very good. I got half the orders out today. The other half are probably going to go out tomorrow or Friday. And so anyone who pre-ordered my book, expect them sometime next week or etc. And there are still some copies available. So head on over to my website. I'll put a link in the description below, and you can check out my book. Also, thank you to all my Patreon supporters. You can go to Patreon and join my Patreon channel for free. And there's content there that you're not going to get anywhere else. And you can also be a supporting member. And there's special content for supporting members as well. The cheapest way you can get in on a supporting member level is $1 a month, which is half a candy bar, $12 a year, and you get to support me, and you get access to all the content on Patreon. But don't worry about it if you don't want to do that. Just join for free, and there's some great content there as well that you can't get anywhere else. So as far as YouTube is concerned, I just lost my lens cap. As you know, I love me some Pentax. And I know I talk a lot lately, or I have been talking a lot lately about Fuji, but if you've been watched my videos for any length of time, you know I used to have the channel Photo Universe, which was kind of all about Pentax on YouTube. And I started Edward Martins, this channel, because I wanted it to be more about my photography and less about gear. Yeah, the jury's out on how successful I was about that. And the reason why is because the YouTube algorithm, you know, if I make a gear video, like, it goes off the charts. And if I make if I spend 3 weeks driving to Texas and make a video in the swamp of me photographing something, like, nobody watches it. So that's YouTube. That's another reason to join Patreon, because over on Patreon I can make any kind of video I want. It's not algorithm driven. And I would also like to go off on a tangent here and say that if you're watching YouTube photographers with more than 100,000 subscribers, you're wasting your time. I haven't seen one that, I mean, the videos are great and they're somewhat entertaining, but they're not really great photography videos. If that may, I mean, who needs 7 pro tips on, and I'm guilty myself trying to chase the algorithm. I've done it, but I'm not doing it anymore. And 7 pro tips that only pros know on how to take pro landscapes. Is there such a thing? So I'll give you 3 YouTubers right off the bat, and all of them have less than 50,000 subscribers. I think Ben Horn might have more than that, a few more than that. Ben Horn's one of them. I think he's fantastic. He shoots 8x10 film. The guy knows what he's doing, and he's a real photographer, and you can learn a lot from him. Craig Roberts, E6 Vlogs, is another one. He has like 35,000 subscribers. Great guy, serious photographer, really knows what he's talking about, really knows what he's doing. And AOWS, Adrian, about 35,000 subscribers, another really dedicated to the craft, true photographer. So there's 3 off the top of my head I can highly recommend. Anyway, sorry to go off on a tangent. The algorithm hates that. And it's not a way to attract new subscribers on YouTube. Which, by the way, if any of this is what I'm talking about, or any of this video tickles your fancy, hit the old subscribe button and the like button, because that's what YouTube's all about. Anyway, love me some Pentax, even though I talk a lot about Fuji. And this is my 6.7. And the reason why I'm talking about this is because I want to shoot more Pentax moving forward. I just picked up another 6.7 because I couldn't resist. It was so cheap and it was in such good condition, and it's like brand new. And, good to have a backup, because this is a camera that I always want to have. You know, I've looked at the Hasselblads and etc. You know, what I'm going to do, and this is going to be a video coming up here shortly, is I'm going to pop the prism, which I can do right here. So in here, that's the prism comes off. And when you do that, when you put the prism back on the 6.7, I'll reiterate this, there's a little chain drive in here that indexes the lens to the meter, particularly with the TTL meter. You don't want to put the meter back on. That's how you'll break the chain. What you want to do is take the lens off first, okay? And then you're free to put the TTL prism back on the camera because it sets the chain back to the starting position so that it can index the meter. Anyway, the rule of thumb is always take the lens off before you put the prism back on. Okay, so what I want to do is I want to put some frame lines, and I ordered some really fine line 1/64 of an inch striping tape, and I want to put a couple of frame lines across here in a 24 by 65 millimeter crop, okay? And I also want to put some frame lines this way so I can indicate square. Now, it won't keep me from shooting 6x7, but what it does do, it'll help me to compose the 24 by 65 Hasselblad X-Pan panoramic shots on 120 film. And it'll also allow me to shoot square on 120 film, the crop for 6x7, if that made any sense at all. In other words, like I can compose square for later use in the darkroom or on the computer, etc. They're just aids to help me do that. And the easiest way to do that is just put them right on the ground glass there with some sticky tape. So that's my plan for my 6.7s. Prism on first, then lens. And that's my 90, which I prefer the 90 over the 105. And here's my Pentax LX, which I don't shoot enough, and I want to start shooting more of. And the subject of today's video, the Pentax K1 Mark II. There was a rumor, well, not a rumor, there was a statement by the guy who's a sales representative for Pentax in France and Switzerland, who said that they're not going to be concentrating on SLRs anymore, and they're going to be concentrating on their film cameras and their point and shoots. And Cape Knight's Gallery made a video saying, well, he's not sure if they're going to be a K1 Mark III. And you know, I've been following Pentax for years, as you can tell, even though I'm, you know, don't really push them too much on my channel anymore. I obviously appreciate the brand, and I obviously have a lot of Pentaxes and a lot of lenses. And so I follow the brand very closely, even though I don't make a lot of videos about them. And here's my take on the whole thing. When Ricoh bought out Pentax, my opinion is, and I think this is a relatively educated opinion, my opinion is that Pentax is a status brand in the Japanese culture. And I think that it was a status symbol. The president of, or the CEO, or whatever the Japanese equivalent of that is, of Ricoh, said, let's buy this company from Hoya. It's available. We'll get the brand name, which has status recognition, okay? And we'll tie it to the Ricoh brand name, therefore elevating Ricoh to a higher status, okay? And I think that's very important in Japanese culture. But the CEO said, let's run this to a budget. So, because it's not going to be, you know, we shouldn't sink a bunch of money into it because it's not going to go anywhere because camera sales are declining. But so just put the money into it that we can still make a profit, kind of a deal. And in order to do that, in my opinion, their focus, pardon the pun, no, not intended, was to bring in the Pentax brand from being a world brand and trying to have domination over Nikon and Canon and Sony on the world stage. And let's take Pentax Ricoh and let's make it a national brand that we also export to the rest of the world. And that's what I think has happened with Pentax. I think Pentax is a Japanese company. It's now a Japanese brand that's aimed at the Japanese market, the national market. Any sales that they get outside of Japan are icing on the cake, but it's not their main focus anymore. And the reason why I feel that way is, well, if you go into the Pentax K1 Mark II, the updates and the upgrades, you've got film simulations, if you will. You know, when you on a Fuji, when you pick a film simulation, it's how your JPEG turns out. Well, I forget what they call them on here. They call them, let's look. So instead of film simulations, you've got creative modes or something, if you want to call them that way. You've got bright, you've got natural, portrait, landscape, vibrant / Miyabi. Okay. And this is the English version of the menu. Radiant, muted, flat, bleach bypass, reversal film, monochrome, cross-processing, Satobi. Satobi? What's a Satobi? In English? Gold and Fuyuno. That's because I've got the 31 limited on it. I get Fuyuno. What's Fuyuno? F-U-Y-U-N-O. Well, if you're Japanese, you know what that is. Yeah, that it kind of says to me like we're kind of marketing this to Japan and to the Japanese homeland. And you're welcome to use our camera if you want, if you don't live there. But we don't really care if you buy it or not, which is fine by me. I mean, if that's what keeps Pentax alive, and that's what keeps as long as they keep selling them outside the country, I'm totally happy with that. So I don't think that the sales manager in France and Switzerland has any clue what the Japanese home company is doing or what the management of the Japanese home company is planning. Yes, DSLRs are in decline, and maybe they're not selling that well in Switzerland and in France, and maybe they're not selling that well in Japan either. But the point is Pentax is operating on a shoestring budget, okay, and they're putting out products every once in a while because it doesn't really matter. You know, if you have low overhead, you don't need high sales. And so the reports have been that they've been profitable. The monochrome camera, the K3 Mark III monochrome, exceeded their expectations in terms of what they wanted to sell. So did the film camera, the 17, which I don't understand that at all, but whatever. And so there it is. They're doing something right, because they're making a profit, and they might not be setting the world on fire, but they're not losing money and going bankrupt either. And so I think that's all one could hope for and all one could wish for. And I think that there is a K1 Mark III in the works, and I think all 3 people or 6 people that work in the Pentax Research and Development Department are working on it, and I think it's going to take 2 to 5 years before it comes out, if it ever comes out at all. But I don't think it's being squashed. Okay, I think we may see a K3. I think we may see a K1 Mark III, and I think it's going to be a lot like the K3 Mark III, and I think it's going to be a lot like the K3 Mark III, and that'll be great. Although I will say that of the 2 cameras, the K1 Mark II and the K3 Mark III, I prefer the K1 Mark II because that's kind of the last Pentax, in the sense that the UI and the handling and the menus and everything, it feels like a Pentax. When the K3 Mark III is more like a Ricoh. It's more modern. The displays are more difficult to see. They're smaller, etc. And it's not laid out as well. There's no aspect ratios in it. And I mean, the lack of a tilting screen, whatever, on the K3 Mark III, that's neither here nor there, although it's hard to use a camera without a tilting screen these days because so many of them have them and you're so used to them. But the aspect ratios, the 1-to-1 aspect ratio, particularly on the monochrome. I really like the monochrome and I'd love to shoot the monochrome, but it's a lot of money for a camera that's not really what I want. I love the monochrome sensor. When I shoot monochrome, I shoot 1-to-1. I shoot square a lot. And I would love the ability to have some kind of a marking in the camera that would help me to compose a square image on the monochrome. That's number one. And the lack of a tilt screen is number two. On that camera, it's a lot of money for a sensor with some features that I could use that I'm missing, which the K1 has for less money. So there is that. Yeah, so that's my take on Pentax, and that's my take on the Pentax K1 Mark III. I believe it's coming. I don't know when. Eventually. Could be a couple of years, but that's Pentax. So having said all that, I will also say that surprisingly, one of my favorite cameras of all time to shoot with, and one of my favorite cameras of all time, is the K1 Mark II. I really enjoy shooting with that camera. There's something about the SLR viewfinder and the mix of features on that camera. I really wouldn't change a thing, although I would have wished for a little bit higher quality video. That would have been more useful for me, but that's okay. The image quality is so good out of the K1 Mark II that I've been willing to put up with it. Now, I don't shoot it all the time. It's kind of every time I do shoot it, I really, really enjoy the image quality out of that camera. I just find it superior. And it's not the full frame sensor. That's not it. It's the Pentax colors, the way it renders the images, etc. And it's probably the glass. I absolutely love those limited lenses. I've always been trying to figure out how do I make my YouTube videos and shoot the K1 Mark II. I think I may use the Thomas Eaton approach, where he uses a hybrid approach, where he shoots either his free Hasselblad that Hasselblad gave him, or his Nikon sponsored him, and he shoots a Fuji X-T5 for his in-the-field videos, plus a pocket Osmo and maybe an action camera. I don't know, but I'm thinking I'm going to use my Fuji X-H2 as my video camera, my main video camera, and then shoot with the Pentax K1 Mark II for my stills camera. I love my X-T5, and it makes a lot of sense in terms of a system, but I love shooting with the K1 Mark II. So it's kind of, I don't know. You know what? I'm spoiled for choice, and I really appreciate the luxury of having all these possibilities. And I want to shoot more film. I want to shoot 6.7. I got to rebuild my darkroom. I just put a post up on Patreon, a video up on Patreon for all members regarding my status of my darkroom project. So go join Patreon if you want to watch that video for free. It's up for free if you want to be a free member, or if you want to subscribe, or not subscribe. If you want to be a supporting member, that's always cool as well and greatly appreciated. If not, just subscribe here at this channel on YouTube, and that would be awesome as well. And I really appreciate it. Hey, if you've watched this long, I really appreciate it as well. And we'll see you out there. Have a great one.